Welcome to the Sportsman's Voice podcast, your inside connection to outdoor legislation. From the Beltway to policy happening your way, we're covering it all. I'm your host, Fred Bird. Join us as we explore public land access, wildlife and fisheries management, Second Amendment rights, the triumphs that shape our nation, the sports we all love, and the stories that fuel our passion for the great outdoors. This is the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. This week, we welcome back Senior Director of Fisheries for CSF, Chris Horton, Commissioner Blankenship from Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, and Tom Decker of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. This week, we're talking about the Sport Fish Restoration Boating Trust Fund and the 75th anniversary of that. We've covered that quite a bit here in the first two quarters of the year. Lots to celebrate there, but brought these professionals on to talk about exactly what that means at the federal level, at the state level, and then how they work together and what that means for mission delivery on the ground and what all those dollars do. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it off to Chris Horton, your fan favorite here on the program, and take us through what we got going on here.
Yeah, thanks, Fred, and certainly want to thank our guests for joining us. You know, y'all hear enough from us on this quite a bit, but the Sport Fish Restoration and Boating Trust Fund is it's a cornerstone, really, of the American system of conservation funding. You've heard us say it before, but there's really no other program in the world like what we have with the wildlife and sport fish restoration programs, and we're really going to jump into that a little bit more detail here with our special guest. But I often say it's one of the greatest conservation stories that's never told or not told often enough. And we at CSF work with state legislators around the country, and it's a constant education effort for us. Whenever you get new legislators starting new terms, they look at this pot of funding here from wildlife and fishing license or hunting and fishing license sales. And it's like, well, can we use that for the budget? Well, no, you can't. And there's a really good reason for that. So, we work to defend it. We work to make sure that people are educated on the significance of it at the policymakers level. But this being the 75th anniversary of this highly successful program really kind of marks a point where we can look back and celebrate the success, but we also need to be thinking about the future too. What's this program look like moving forward and the solvency of it long term? And those are bigger questions that the community is looking at. But right now we're going to get into the real nuts and bolts of it from some experts here. So, Brett, I'll turn it back to you to introduce.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to echo those sentiments and again acknowledge some of the redundancies for the audience. But new folks coming in, new legislators that are finding the show. To Chris's point, this is like the most undertold story that does the most for our community for conservation. Um, Many of the conversations we've had are trying to find solutions, find solves for that. How can we tell this great story? I imagine we're going to get into some of that here, and with that, let's welcome in Tom Decker with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Tom, take us through how the program works, and first give us a background of you and what you do at the service.
All right. Well, thank you and good morning, everybody. I'm a biologist by training. I've been worked for a state fish and wildlife agency or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Oh, long time since like 1991. Always in this program that we sport fish restoration or wildlife restoration funding. So that's been the cornerstone of my career on projects that are funded through these excise taxes and licensed dollars. So I currently work nationally on a program called Partner with a Payer, which engages state fish and wildlife agencies and the industries and manufacturers that are paying the excise taxes on various equipment, which I'll go through in a minute. And I also work with colleagues that oversee the National Survey on Hunting, Angling, and Wildlife Watching. So that's another element of what we do to measure these activities in the American public. So I'll just take you through it. As you mentioned, 75th anniversary of Sport Fish Restoration Act. That is a funding model or mechanism also referred to as the American System of Conservation Funding. The Sport Fish Restoration Act and Boating Trust Fund are modeled off of the Wildlife Restoration Act, which passed in 1937. Took a little while longer, but sport fish came along in 1950, has been amended through time, but functionally, it's a manufacturer's excise tax on various types of angling equipment at a 10% rate. It's also a tax on electric trolling motors at 3%. There's also import duties on tackle, pleasure boats, and yachts. And then the amendments brought in motorboat fuel tax that are attributed. Uh, it's a fuel tax paid at the refinery, and it's a federal tax that's attributed towards motorboats, and it's based off of registered boats in each state. Then there's another small percent that's a small engine fuel tax distributed to small engines, and then the trust fund receives interest earned. So those are the sources of revenue that pay in annually, and um, right now are between about 600 million and 700 million dollars annually. So a significant source of revenue. Those federal dollars under the program have to be matched by state dollars, a non-federal share. That share is a 25% share of every grant. So the strength of the program is every grant combines both federal at a 75% match and state dollars, which is usually the license dollars, to develop a project. Um, in terms of sources of funds coming in, on average, for about the last 10 years, about 65 to 68% of those revenues are from the motorboat and small engine portion of the taxes coming in. So by far, um, s- the fuel and and the motor part bring in. Now every dollar counts. I don't want to discount any sources of revenue. They all play a very important element, and they come in. And so in terms of just going out, they can go out on eligible projects related to sport fish, and sport fish is actually defined in the law. You know, for those who really want the definitions, and it's an aquatic gill-breathing vertebrate with paired fins, and it has material value for recreation in marine or freshwater environment, and that equates to about 200 species of fish throughout the states and territories. So to receive funds, um, the eligible places are state fish and wildlife or territorial fish and wildlife agencies. They have to bring a match to it. Every state had to pass what's called assent legislation to participate in the program. And what assent legislation means is by state law, the state is going to use fishing license or hunting license dollars only for the administration of the Fish and Wildlife Agency. So it won't be switched over to roads or prisons or schools. It has to stay with conservation, which is the source of funding from those licenses. And they have to certify their licenses every year. And in that way, that triggers an apportionment. The apportionment of how much money any given state gets is based on 40% on the number of licenses they sell, and then 60% on the area. And that would be the land and water area. So the Great Lakes would be included, Lake Champlain would be included. Um, so that is a predictable portion of apportionment to the state agency budgets, which they rely on heavily for funding. It also funds some competitive programs nationally called BIG and CVA. That's the Clean Vessel Act and a boating infrastructure grant for piers and marinas and for pump out stations. And so that's apportioned. And then the states can use up to 15% for aquatic education. So they have a number of things they can fund to meet their mission. The aquatic ed things would be formal programs like Let's Go Fishing, R3 programs to teach people or introduce people in the angling, etc. So those are the things that they can do. Research, management. They run over 9,000 boating access and fishing access areas nationally, collectively. They fund over 231 fish hatcheries. They stock over 1.2 billion fish of 70 different species around the country. So collectively, that money has a huge presence on the landscape for the benefit of people, benefit of those fisheries resource, collect information to make informed decisions. And so with that, I'll pause there. That's a lot. But the program does a lot, and it's designed to meet the needs of the state fish and wildlife agencies and things they're dealing with on the landscape.
Very good. Before, I'm taking some notes there because, as you acknowledge, there's quite a bit of meat there to chew on. Um, Before we get to Commissioner Blankenship, I wanted to ask, well, or remark rather that this was modeled after Pittman Robinson, and so much so the way the people that are funding it, right? I just when you said that 65 to 70% voting is paying so much. The same thing on the sporting side is that you have recreational shooters, outpacing the hunting community in their contributions, and without them, it would be tough to execute that. So I just first off just found that really interesting. They both have a majority contributing to each individual one. Um, and then lastly here, before moving on, you mentioned R3 and angling, and like the other, some of those PR dollars go to hunter education. You guys have this R3 initiative in angling education. You don't hear a lot of folks in our space talking about R3 as it pertains to angling. And it seems that's one of the most biggest low hanging pieces of fruit to get people into the outdoors. It's not as equipment intensive, cost intensive. It's pretty easy to get a fishing rod, a fishing pole in someone's hand and introduce them. I do wonder, have you guys experienced in your positions any pushback on R3 the way we're starting to see it in the shooting and hunting side of the house?
Well, so a couple things. So similarities in wildlife restoration, that's tax on firearms, ammunition, and archery equipment. And that's about $1.2 billion annually, so a little bit more. And um, relatedly, about 72% of the funds are from non-hunting sources. So they're from people who are target shooting, personal defense, etc. So that's somewhat the similarity that you're referring to. The similarities in safety are that there's about 700,000 people that take state hunter ed classes every year from the safety part, and the Coast Guard gets a portion of sport fish funds for boating safety programs as well. And then there's that R3 part, introducing people to get them out on the water, um, good fishing practices, how to fish, how not to introduce the wrong type of plant or invasive species, how to basically be better at it, be mentored at it. That's similar for either target shooting and hunting or the angling and boating part. And so, is there pushback? I mean, no, everybody, will say, well, I don't want more people where I'm doing those activities. But at the same time, I think everybody recognizes connecting to nature, getting out on the water, making memories, eating good food. Those are just good things that people do at a community level, and learning how to do them if you don't know, but anyone who knows how to do them and teach you, maybe the way you and I learned, that's still an important thing and an important function. And it's done by non-government agencies, it's done by government agencies, and it's really just to create advocates, constituents who are concerned about nature, about what happens out there, and are active, just active and enjoying things. So that's sort of the common denominator among all those things.
It seems access may be easier to obtain whether you're, offshore, inshore, freshwater fishing versus trying to find a good spot to deer hunt or turkey hunt, right? So that access portion of it may not get as much pushback. It's just a general curiosity of mine. It's a very small, group of folks in the community that have take issue with it, but ultimately,
Yep.
to your point, the more people that are putting into the system, the better for everybody.
Yeah.
Um
We haven't really, yeah, seen that pushback on the fishing and boating side. There, one of the reauthorizations of the Sport Fish Restoration Boating Trust Fund It might have been the Wallet-Bro amendment that basically established a national outreach and communication plan, national NOCP. Congress directed uh, the states and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to find ways to recruit more folks and to get them outdoors and get them fishing and boating. And 2% of the fund, I believe, is dedicated to that national outreach communication plan, which
That's correct. Yep.
yeah,
Very good. Well, that's a good transition to Commissioner Blankenship, who can definitely touch on this at the state level. But, sir, welcome to the conversation. Thanks for your time. Quick background on you, your quick resume there, if you would. Give us the lowdown of what's happening in Alabama and how you facilitate this at the state level.
Sure. So appreciate having the opportunity to share a little bit about what we're doing in Alabama. Like I said, I'm the commissioner of the department here. I started with the department in 1994 as a conservation officer, a game warden, and have had the unusual opportunity to move through the department and was appointed by Governor Ivey in 2017 as commissioner. So I've been commissioner right at 8 years, which is a pretty good amount of time in these positions as they're appointed. And, happy to serve under the governor and get to do a lot of good things. You know, all the things that you talked about when you're out in the field. That if I was ever commissioner, I'd do these things. And it doesn't always work like that when you get to be here. I've been able to fix a lot of the things that I always thought needed to be done, and then there's other things that yeah, I see now why they never did that. But really, we've got a lot of great things happening in Alabama. I'm very, very thankful for that opportunity. So, two of the divisions that we have in the Department of Conservation, we have our Wildlife Freshwater Fisheries Division, which is obviously the freshwater fishing side, and then we have our Marine Resources Division, where we handle all the saltwater fisheries on the coast. So that's kind of how we divide up our sport fishing dollars between those two divisions. We also have state parks in the Department of Conservation and our state lands, the Fairable Wild Program. We manage all the offshore oil and gas leasing and pipelines and manage state properties. We got probably about 1 million acres of land that we're managing, um, either for wildlife or through our state lands programs, education lands and that sort of thing. So I get to see all sides of it. The wildlife side and the fishery side and how they compare. And um, uh, appreciate the program. It's really, I've been able to see it from the marine side and how it works there when I was our marine resources division director before I became commissioner. And so now on the freshwater side, we've really tried to use those funds. And uh, I can say that on the fishery side, it's not near as many dollars as it is on the wildlife side. What goes into the trust fund from ammunition and gun sales over the last decade has really increased the apportionment on the hunting side, wildlife side, and we hadn't really seen a corresponding change on the fishery side. It's not grown as fast, and so we have to be a lot more creative on the fishery side to be able to do good things. Right now in Alabama, we generally have used those sport fish dollars. We've done a lot of boating access, boat ramps. We got 150 boat ramps in the state. We only, we don't get that much money comparatively uh, for fisheries work, and so we get, in Alabama, $8 to $9 million a year on sport fish side, and we split that between our about 19% of that goes to the marine side and 81% to the freshwater side. So if you're looking at $6 million a year or so to do all of our fisheries work, uh, so it's not a tremendous amount of money. So we've been able to beat the bushes and come up with some other creative ideas. And right now we got about $56 million in boating access projects going on around the state, which is pretty phenomenal you know, for a state our size, and happy to partner with other folks. And, when I give speeches around the state, I have the opportunity to talk to Rotary clubs and Kiwanis and then other opportunities to speak. And I always talk about the uh, DJ and the PR dollars that come into the state. Most people don't realize that our department is not funded with general fund dollars. It's funded by hunting and fishing license sales, and then the matching federal dollars is how we do all that we do around the state. And that's always a shock to people when I say that. So I always include that in my programs, and it's just a good story too that how that was started by the gun manufacturers and the in during the Depression in 1937, that they put a tax on themselves that if they did that and gave that monies to the state to manage the resource, that it would be good for them business wise. And it was very progressive, especially during the Depression. And then to bring that over to the sport fish side finally in 1950, it's been the model has worked extremely well, and very thankful for what we get to do with it. You talk about the R3 and education. We have something in Alabama we started a few years ago called the Outdoor Alabama Academy, and so we started that with like shooting 101, hunting 101, turkey hunting 101, fishing 101. Just people that didn't grow up doing the things that we all grew up doing. It's amazing how over a generation or two it went from everybody fished to not everybody fishes or has fished. And, it seems so foreign to me. I grew up on Dolphin Island. Fishing was a huge part of uh, my my childhood, growing up. And, so when we started some of these fishing 101 classes, I was like, well, I don't, who doesn't know how to fish? And as soon as we put those things online, they filled up in minutes.
Mm.
We had to add more classes, and so even to this day, of all the academy classes that we do, that fishing 101 class is they fill up in short order, and it's just been great to do those and to teach people how to fish because, like you said, it is an easy. Uh, the barriers to entry in fishing are a lot less than it is in hunting, and the comfort levels that once somebody get the hang of fishing. We have 23 state fishing lakes around the state that we manage through our Department of Conservation. Of course, there's all the Alabama Power and TVA reservoirs around the state. Plus, we have more miles of navigable waterway in Alabama than anywhere else, and then our great fishing along the coast. And so, teaching somebody how to fish, man, they got plenty of opportunities. They just need the competence. And so, uh, those have been really. I enjoy going to those and just these aren't kids learning how to fish. These are people our age, or and 20 and 30 and 40-year-olds that show up to these classes and um, learn how to fish. And we partner with Academy on some of them and give them rods and reels, give them some tackle so that they don't have to go out and buy it. At least that first one, hopefully we're creating an addiction for them, just like it has been for me, where they fish all the time and spend a bunch of money on it over time.
What are some of the challenges at the state level you're seeing? I mean, obviously, you can only speak for Alabama, but where this program has helped backfill or support, and you said getting creative with the utilization of some of these dollars. As far as a problem solver, what have you seen in your tenure?
I mean, so these funds have been, are great, first and foremost, just for the access, like the boat ramps and just building artificial reefs. We have the largest artificial reef program in the country off the coast of Alabama, and so we, started building a lot of these reefs with some sport fish dollars, and been able because of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill and other opportunities, been able to tap into funds from National Fish and Wildlife Life Foundation and others to do some of that work. So we've been able to dedicate more of the sport fish dollars to, um, some of our work in our hatcheries, um, with the research that we do not only internally, but then also with our partners from Auburn University, University of South Alabama to answer some of the management questions that we need to be able to adequately manage these fisheries. And like I said, the 23 state lakes um, were all built in the 50s, 60s, uh, with the dams, just like the program, the dams are 60 and 75 years old and need some work done on those to expand those fishing opportunities at these state lakes. And, um, just having these dedicated funds for that has um, been fantastic. And he talked about the assent legislation. Um, most people don't, most people in the world don't understand what that means, but you know, what it really means for us is they can't take our money. They can't take our hunt and fishing license money and that comes into the Department of Conservation. Um, that's not something that can be diverted to do other things in the state. It has to be spent for the people that pay that license fee. That's been huge for us. And it is getting harder and harder for some of the new legislators to understand that. The constant education, especially when somebody new comes in, is like, well, that's not that big a deal. We'll just take that money and do something else with it. And it's like, well, if you do, it's going to be about, this is the economic impact that it's going to have in the state. And when your constituents that hunt and fish start calling, it's not going to be, it's not going to be popular in your district, especially no matter what district you live in Alabama, whether it's rural or urban. People hunt, but sure enough, people fish, and it's a it's a big deal, big deal.
Yeah. I'm glad y'all both mentioned the scent clause because that's something I point out that's so important to this whole program. And I'm just amazed at the foresight that Senator Key Pittman and uh, Congressman A. Willis Robertson had when they created the Pittman Robertson Act. Is that was right up front. This assent clause is that you have access to these funds to do stuff for wildlife, provided that your state legislature passes a law that it's dedicated to the wildlife management and that those funds can only be used for that. And so many times over the years during my tenure at CSF, we've had to call what used to be called the Whisper office. Now it's the Office of Conservation, and tell them, hey, we need some help over here. It looks like a governor California one year was thinking about sweeping the funds for helping to balance the budget, or even my home state of Arkansas. It wasn't actually sweeping the funds, but it was putting the control of how those funds are spent under the legislature rather than the state Fish and Wildlife Commission, which is where it's supposed to reside according to our constitution, and that constitutes a loss of control. So Fish and Wildlife Service sent a letter to the director so that he could share with members of the legislature saying, hey, if you do this, you're going to lose. I think at the time, Arkansas was like 17 or $18 million in Pittman Robertson, Dingle Johnson funds. And it's like, whoa, we don't want to lose that. So backed off. But yeah, it's just this constant education, but just the foresight that those legislators has in 1937 to think at some point, some legislature, some governor is going to try to grab these funds. We've got to have something in here that protects them. And it's been very effective.
We talk about being creative. We've had, like a lot of states, or some states, not a lot of states, but we've had a surplus in our budget in Alabama really the last 5 years, but particularly the last 3 years have been, really, really good from our legislature is very fiscally responsible and has not, appropriated every dollar that is anticipated to come in. We've had some really good um, revenue years for Alabama. And so we've been able to work with both of the budget chairs and the majority leader and the Speaker of the House and the pro tem of the Senate, and provide about $6 million a year the last 3 years out of the general fund to the Department of Conservation for us to do some good work. And that has allowed us, uh, especially on the wildlife side, to draw down some other federal funds that maybe we wouldn't have had access to because we didn't have the state dollars to be able to do that. For shooting sports and this last $6 million that we got from the legislature, most of that we're going to use on our state lakes and do fisheries work because those state lakes have, I think those are kind of a keystone location, especially in our rural counties, for people to get to come and fish and provide fish for their families. We just did a groundbreaking at Walker County Lake on June the 5th on some renovations we're going to do up there that included, some other things on the property. And it was unbelievable the amount of people from the community that turned out for the groundbreaking. It was only about 95 degrees and 100% humidity. So at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on June the 5th, for that many people to show up, to sit out there and to stand out there and sweat as we talked about the good work that's going to happen on the lake just shows the community uh, appreciation for those facilities. And you were trying to do a lot of that work all over the state. $6 million when you're talking about replacing earthen dams and doing other work doesn't go as far as you think it does. And but I do appreciate the support from the legislature. That's the first time I've been here 31 years. That's the first time in 31 years that we've gotten any money from the general fund to do either fisheries or wildlife work really at all. No, not a single dollar in 31 years until 3 years ago. So um, I think helping them understand the importance of that, and then also showing if you invest $6 million, we can turn that $6 million into whether you're turning that into $24 million or really more than that on some of the with the shooting sports, some of the opportunities and with some 90-10 match on a certain amount of that money. You know, most of those guys are businessmen on the budget committees, and when you're talking about taking 6 million and turning it into 24 million, they understand that pretty dang good.
Yep, right.
They see that as a positive, and so it's not a hard sell as long as there was money available. And then we created a um, organization here called Innovate Alabama. Was created by the governor and the legislature several years ago, and what it did is it looked at the assets we had in Alabama and how we can draw more tech companies and gig workers or people that can work from home. How we can draw them to Alabama or retain them here. We do a fantastic job at our universities getting folks to do a great job in our universities getting people to come to Alabama to come to school. My daughter graduated from University of Alabama a few years ago, and over 50% of the students there are from out of state. Her three best friends were from one from Illinois, one from Pennsylvania, and one from Wisconsin. And so I would love for them to stay in Alabama, work, live, and raise a family here. So anyway, we looked at all the assets in the state and working with Dr. Condoleezza Rice and Stanford University, doing all the research and working on that. And so one of the things that came out of that is how blessed we are in Alabama with woods and waters and hunting and fishing and outdoor rec opportunities, and that was a differentiator for us, and that we could use uh, outdoor rec as a not only for enjoyment here, but to really grow our economy in Alabama. And so with that, the legislature apportioned some funds to this outdoor Innovate Alabama, and so we've been able to tap into about $15 million through Innovate Alabama, and a lot of that money is going to boating access improvements, whether that's uh, traditional boat ramps, adding some canoe kayak, uh, which is one of the fastest growing segments of fishing, is the fastest, the kayak fishing, and been able to provide access for those folks on some of our waterways. And so we're creative here, and we've got a lot of good support, and we really just got a lot of good hunting and fishing in Alabama, and it means a lot to our people culturally and economically. And appreciate this program to be able to do good work, really good work.
Yeah, I see the program in general as kind of the base for all state agencies where you guys can get your work done as far as the conservation goes. And in some states, it's almost 100% of their operating budget. Fortunately, Alabama, there's some other states too, Arkansas, Texas, Michigan, some other states have had some opportunities to build on that base using leveraging other funds and opportunities as they come along. But you don't know those are going to come along next year, which was kind of the whole point of Pittman Robertson and Dingle Johnson, was to provide some certainty towards fish and wildlife management and public access to those resources a long time ago. So
And some of the concerns of our staff. I'm not, I'm looking to do good things now. Uh, as the commissioner, you have usually it's a small window to be able to do good work. I'm very because of the way that our governor came in the middle of a term, and I'll if I stay with if she keeps me the whole time, I'll have 10 years as the commissioner, which is in an appointed position is not usual to have more than 8 years max. If I have 10. So we're looking to do all this great work, but our staff is concerned. Hey, we're building all these nice boat ramps, we're doing all this stuff. How are we going to maintain them in the future if we don't have, because we see, on the freshwater fishing side, it's either been stagnant or a little bit of a decrease in the amount of freshwater fishing licenses that we've sold, over the last decade or so. Now we're seeing on the saltwater side a big increase in the amount of people fishing as more people move to the coast and discover how unbelievably good the fishing is in coastal Alabama. We sell a bunch of saltwater fishing licenses, and so how can we do that on the freshwater side and increase those license sales as well as some of the things that we're working on? And we figure the more access we can get people out there, the better the fishing is going to be in our state lakes, and then our reservoirs, the more people will buy fishing licenses, and along with the R3 program. But we're looking at how we can invest in people and in our resources to sell more licenses to continue to do more good work in the future. And you don't think about government being a business, but really with us not getting money from the general fund on a regular basis, it is about how you can generate the funds to continue to do that work.
Well, I'm going to jump in here. I mean, outside of you guys being 100% self-feeding, self-funded, that's one thing that your local government's not having to technically worry about because you guys are standing on your own. And then, the other part to this too that often I think it doesn't go unnoticed, but gets kind of maligned with when we're specifically talking about these two programs and Tom's live service puts out the numbers every year, what those apportionments are and how the whole breakdown is and the matching funds and get you those totals. What isn't reported on there, and it comes from your state, is the economic impact in totality. And I'm not going to quiz you right here and ask for a total. I didn't prep you for that. Oh, Tom's got it. So give me. I'll come back to you, Tom. But really, your local legislatures, your state legislatures, your state governor needs to care about this and needs to champion this because that ecotourism, and I can speak for it up here in New Hampshire because that's a lot of our business is people coming over the state lines and enjoying the natural resources. That is huge and it has such a ripple effect. Tom, I'll kick it back to you because you eagerly wanted to check in on this.
Yeah, so the Fish and Wildlife Service does a survey, a national survey of about 100,000 Americans every 5 years since 1955. We're going to do one in 2027, but the one I wanted to talk about was the one we did in 2022. So if you look at the excise taxes generated at about 470 million a year or last year, and that's matched by those state license dollars, that's a lot of money that's coming into the management, the public opportunity. But we know in 2022, there were over 50 million Americans age 60 and over that fished. They went out angling and they spent over $99 billion in the United States throughout all sectors of the economy, right? In remote local general stores for bait and lures and whatever, throughout the whole economy. And if you looked at that expenditure of 99 billion and do what economists do, figure out the GDP, that was $230 billion in the United States related to angling by the American public, getting out there on the water and creating memories and all those things. So it's a huge economic multiplier across all kinds of states, rural area, suburban areas, even, Washington, D.C. along the Potomac River, right? Not where a lot of people do go and are angling. So um, those opportunities we often take for granted that there are places to get on the water. There are species to fish for, that the fishing is good. Now, for some stocks, it's not as good as I'd like it or you'd like it or used to be a little bit better. But the angling opportunities are out there. And then if I don't know how to go or where do I go, or I can get on a website and see where all those Alabama fishing access sites are right on my phone with an app, that kind of thing. That's a really important enhancement, not just economically, jobs, but we somewhat take it for granted because it's worked so well, so long, and as Chris said, so predictably year to year that those revenues are there for the agencies to use. And the other part that's missed is law enforcement cannot be funded with these funds, but what these funds do is they free up license dollars to pay for wardens on the water. And so the fact that states can have enforcement officers afield to keep fishing strong and make sure some people who would maybe take more than they should don't, or are safe in their boating, it frees up those license dollars to go and do those important measures too. Um, because it really all comes back to this. Angling is important in lives and the lifestyle of the American public. And this whole system puts the structure in place to keep that strong throughout the country. It's a universal asset that's in place. And as Chris said, whoever thought of this model a long time ago, it has played well and served us all well through time.
Tom, when you get those requests to kind of, come in as the air finger quote heavy, right? To Chris's earlier point about having to weigh in with a governor's office or somebody locally, you're like, no, no, can't be doing that. You're gonna screw the whole thing up if you try doing this. I'm curious about some of those, like how receptive are those people that are all of a sudden find a pot of gold, realizing that's not their gold, they can't touch it. How does that go? And then I want to ask Chris the same question because he's definitely more intimate with it at his state level. But Tom, I'll let you go first.
Um, well, you usually don't want to come in as a heavy, even though you're about to tell somebody maybe their great idea is confounded by existing laws that it's not only a federal law, it's a state law. They passed this state law that says we're going to follow these protocols. And if you don't, that is a state decision, but then you can't participate in those things anymore. And that's a lot of money for any state. So generally it's an awareness thing. It's, well, we didn't know this, or it wasn't explained very well, or it doesn't go along with where we wanted to get to in state finance and government. And you understand that because it cycles. It can happen in New York this month and Mississippi 4 months later. But it's usually an awareness thing once they become aware of the benefits, of what it allows the state agency, Fish and Wildlife Agency, to do, of all the things that they want to do. They can do a lot of good things with this money. They just can't do everything in state government with this money. And that's usually enough to carry it forward, and they'll financially pull back and try to have to go somewhere else to perhaps find the money. So it's not really a heavy. It's more just explaining, almost like a referee, explaining the rules on the field. You want to stay on the field with the other team, and the other team is the wildlife and fisheries you're managing. You got to pull back, and I think more of those pressures are seen by the state administrators at very high levels. We don't see them all. We see some that perk up when they say somebody else has perhaps got to explain this because either they're not doing it really. They'll say, we're telling them the same things, but sometimes it takes somebody from a different place to say the same thing for it to sort of take hold. So
And I do appreciate, when we've had legislation that would impact us, uh, that would divert funds or trying to explain that. Fish and Wildlife Service has been very responsive. I mean, like within a day, sometimes the same day, to get us a letter that says, "Hey, we've reviewed this legislation, and if it passes like that this is going to be a problem. This is why." So they've been obviously they have to do this in 50 states all over the country all the time to protect what we've got. So they kind of got some good templates ready to go. But they are very responsive, and I appreciate that help because, uh, as you know, in the state legislature, I mean, a bill will pop up today, and they'll be, you know, it's not like in Congress where it's going to have all this debate or it takes months. They could drop a bill today, tomorrow to be in committee, and if it passes out of committee, could be on the floor to be voted on the next day. So, within 3 days, it could, pass one house or the other. And so having that quick response is, extremely helpful. And just like talked about earlier about, there's a lot of people that didn't that don't hunt or fish. We kinda missed a couple of generations there, especially a generation where not everybody hunted and fishes like we did when we grew up. You see the same thing in the legislature. Those people are getting elected. And so we're used to go over, you talk to folks that hunted and fished, and you can explain, you could start here at this level because they understand hunting and fishing. Now, with a lot of these legislators, you're having to start here because they don't hunt or they don't fish. And so to try to explain the value or the importance of hunting and fishing to their constituents, it's like you got to start at fishing 101 or hunting 101 with some of our legislators to get them to even see the importance of it, to be able to talk about all the things that that we used to use. And so and we've tried to do, you're like your partner with a payer, you talked a little bit about that. We're trying to do a lot more with our legislators between sessions so that they can, get them out to our parks, get them out to some of our wildlife management areas, take them out to our state fishing lakes to kind of uh, show them the value of that in their districts, because that's a key thing that we've had to do, just because there's so many people that just didn't understand that they were getting elected. And I think we've made good inroads there. To do that. And I think seeing that by some of the money that's been appropriated out of the general fund for us to do work, those are direct uh, benefits. Just last thing, and that partner with the payer, we've done a couple of those events where we've gotten people from, Kimber has a facility here in Alabama, a manufacturing facility in Troy, Alabama. They're moving most, uh, they really moved most all of their manufacturing from New York to Alabama. And so we had some folks from Kimber out to one of our wildlife management areas, and I had a partner with a payer event there, and they had no idea. They work in the industry. Their management at Kimber, they had no idea about the program and how the excise tax worked and how we use that uh, to do good things in Alabama. So it was fascinating having them, um, come out and we've done some of that on the fisheries side as well. A couple of manufacturers of boats here in Alabama and different groups, and it's we have Bass. It's headquartered in Alabama as well as Major League Fishing. Both of those have their headquarters here in Alabama, but a lot of their staff totally understood it, but some of them didn't. They didn't know how we fund fisheries work in the state, and so not only have they been good to understand it, but now they want to partner with us and provide some funds from different, either for some stocking or for some boating access work, so that they can grow their events in Alabama. And it's really, the more knowledge that they have with it, the better off it is for everybody.
So a few points here, going back from what you all you just said there. I wrote down here. One, going back to working with the legislatures and both of you guys having that conversation with different levels. I want to highlight obviously our relationship as well at the state level with the NASC network and being able to work through CSF staff on the ground there. I know, especially in Alabama, there's a great relationship there, and working with the state caucuses to help mitigate some of that and help also educate, the caucus members and outside the caucus when we're having those conversations. So it's, for all of us, it's a three point punch here, in a good way. It's like Tom said, maybe they don't want to hear it from him, but they get to hear it from us, and we do it in a different way, but ultimately the message is the same. And, we're shaking some people awake, which is great. And I just wanted to make sure we're pointing that out in the strong relationships all three of our organizations have. Um, and that's part of that storytelling, right? And get into the whole history of this and how the whole thing works. Chris, interestingly enough, I also want to draw this correlation in our final minutes here without bemoaning it too much, but a common theme I see. You mentioned that it's cyclical. Legislators, different people just don't get this stuff. They don't know. They're not educated. And I've talked with Angie Bruce out west, and some other contemporaries of yours, and noticing this trend of your staff coming from higher education, um, who also lack this field experience. So they come out of the school 4 or 6 years of education as a biologist, never having got a line wet, never having set a trap, never shooting a duck or a dove. And they're put in these positions of management with a somewhat of a preservationist mindset under the guise of conservation because that's what they've been fed in school. I feel like you guys at the state level for sure have this challenge, and if you could speak to it real quick of, how you're lining your folks up to get on board with how this all works.
Yeah, and so we've had a little bit of a challenge with that. You're exactly right. People, and I'm like Zach. I come from the field side and grew up doing this. Uh, you get a lot of folks now that think they want to. We're very supportive of the School of Marine and Environmental Science at the University of South Alabama, because we're trying to, as we get more students coming through there, those are folks we want to hire. And the same thing with Auburn University. We've tried to work with those schools to include in the curriculum opportunities for those folks to get out and participate in what they're studying, what the conservation that they're wanting to be a part of. Um, and that has been again, if I wanted to go into that field, you would think it's somebody that has hunted or fished and been a part of that their whole life, and so that just naturally that's what they want to do. Well, you're right. We're finding out more and more. You got people that didn't really enjoy the outdoors, but they're majoring in biology or marine biology or wildlife sciences, and it's like, why did you choose that for a field, without that background? But it's been great. A lot of those folks have also been able to train them in the ways to do it right. They didn't have a bunch of bad habits when they came to work
Mm.
for us. So, especially on the boating side, we don't have to untrain bad boating operation
From
behavior.
redneck red education.
Yeah, we can train them from the start. So it's been positives and negatives, but really, we've got such a good group of young people that are coming to work for us. I'm excited about the future. Uh, and we're at that stage. Like a lot of these programs, we got a lot of people that are retiring. Like we hired a bunch of people 25 and 30 years ago that are getting to that age to retire
Mhm.
now. And so we've got a lot of openings, and we got a lot of really good people coming in behind them, I think. And I'm excited to, for the future. And they come in with new ideas and new ways of looking at things. And I said, again, maybe they didn't have that negative from or been trained by the uncle or the grandfather from the past, how you got to do it, and so they come in with a different outlook on things. And so we've been able to tap into some of that. And some of these R3 programs that we're doing really come out of those type people that have come to work for us, and with us trying to get them to understand why we do what we do, we've been taking a lot of those principles and taking it back out to the public. And it- it's been it's been exciting. It's exciting.
Tom, jump in.
Fred, that's a big part of what Partner with a Payer does. We get manufacturers who are paying those excise taxes out with the state agencies so they can see on the ground, putting a radio collar on a black bear, raising fish in a hatchery, managing state lands, what do public boating access areas look like, so they can see where that money goes and actually is invested in fish and wildlife health labs, fish hatcheries, all kinds of infrastructure that's expensive to operate. You don't just open it up for a year and say, "Oh, it's all good." You got to run a fish hatchery, and if a state has 5 fish hatcheries ranging 8 types of fish, and they're going to put out fish in 720 lakes, rivers, and ponds, that's a huge effort. And then vice versa, we get state and federal employees who are not exposed to this through their formal training or their life experiences thus far, and they go to Sig Sauer, they go to Colt, they go to Shimano, they go across the spectrum to see what does it take to generate that. That's the whole idea behind Partner with a Payer, is that exposure of fish and wildlife professionals whose salaries are derived from the excise taxes at the state level. So there's state employees across all walks of life that maybe haven't had that exposure before, and they do now because it wasn't part of their formal college curriculum, but through practical interaction with the industries themselves. They're really informal, but they're very eye-opening about like how this system of conservation funding works that Chris was talking about in the beginning. It's uniquely in the United States. It doesn't exist any other place, and it keeps the lights on for conservation, restoration, reintroduction, habitat management, public opportunities, target shooting ranges across the full spectrum, whether it's sport fish restoration or wildlife restoration. It covers many, many things that the public and the resources benefit from.
And that's a good point that you just brought up. It doesn't exist like this in other parts of the country. We've been very successful in Alabama at attracting investment from around the world. We have Mercedes-Benz has a plant here, um, Degussa, Bayer Chemical, um, Oda, Okapumpu, that's steel. But anyway, so I've had the chance to meet a lot of those guys that are executives at those companies that have come to work here in Alabama, and they love living in Alabama. When they talk about hunting, like they, e- especially the guys from Germany, like they love it here unbelievably because how you can own a gun and you can hunt, you can do these things, you have opportunity to fish, and so I have got to learn how how blessed we are in America with what we have here versus what they have in the rest of the world, and how they are able to either access or not access those resources in other places. And so it's been pretty cool to me to talk to those guys. Like just the fact to go to a wildlife management area and hunt to the guy from, the CEO of the steel mill from Germany. Like we had an hour-long conversation about how you can't do that there. But
Mhm.
coming here, like I ask about, going back or, how long are you here for? And he's like, I'm here for the rest of my life. And I love it here. And we are blessed. And sometimes I think we take that for granted. Our public takes that for granted because they've
Oh,
always had that access. And
no No doubt, no doubt. And I think that's a great segue in a way we're gonna close the show here out of respect for everyone's time. I'm gonna kick it back to Chris Horton here is celebrating what Commissioner Blankenship just said. Like, we take this for granted, but yet we still recognize we're the envy of the world, how this whole system works, and we are blessed to have these resources. And in doing so, we're celebrating that this year as we kicked off the top of the show, recognizing this is the 75th anniversary of this groundbreaking law from 1937 and up to 1950, obviously. So, Chris, talk about CSF's efforts, what we're doing across the states, and then also I'll get closing remarks from Tom and Chris on this auspicious occasion.
Yeah, I think it's been touched on well as to why we're celebrating this 75th and trying to get as much information out there on it as possible is because of this whole education component, and that we have to continually re-educate folks that we have something really special here. It's funded by those that use it. It doesn't just benefit those that use the resource. I mean, fish restoration, habitat restoration, whether on wildlife side, fishery side, benefits all species, not just those that we pursue hunting or fishing. So it's a incredibly important program, uh, and so we're pushing with all the states a resolution on celebrating the 75th anniversary. Which is not uncommon for us to push resolutions in states celebrating the American system of conservation funding, but we're trying to do that in all 50 states this year for the 75th anniversary of sportfish restoration. Um, Likewise, every year we do a National Hunting and Fishing Day proclamation with governor's office. Again, the same opportunity to really highlight with state executives the importance of the program within their states. So, um, in addition to that, this also happens to be we're coming up on the reauthorization of the Sport Fishing Building Trust Fund. Because of the Wallet-Bro Amendment, it has to be reauthorized every 5 years and usually associated with the highway uh, infrastructure bill because of the marine fuel tax. So the industry and fishing organizations, along with the boating industry folks, we get together, figure out what little tweaks we need to make to the bill to make it more efficient, and we bring that to Congress and have to get that reauthorized. It's usually a bipartisan effort, but with everything going on in Congress all the time, especially this go around, you've got to be very engaged in pushing the bill so it doesn't fall off the table because it was not high enough on the pro. It wasn't contentious enough for it to actually get the attention it needed. So we have to be there at the table pushing on it every 5 years, and we already have the language drafted. Matter of fact, it was just introduced by Congresswoman Debbie Dingell and Congressman Rob Whitman from Virginia, Miss Dingell's from Michigan, and the name Dingle is not insignificant here. It was her father-in-law, John Dingell, that passed the Dingell-Johnson Act. So she's carrying on that legacy. Has always been a strong leader for us there. But it's a program that's worth defending, and we're celebrating. So we're doing all we can from our perspective. We know our other um, fellow fishing conservation organizations out there are doing it. The states are doing it. Partner with a payer. Everybody's trying to really highlight using the 75th anniversary as an opportunity again to harp on the success of this program.
Chris, I'll let you have your closing remarks, and we'll end it with Tom.
I just appreciate the opportunity to talk about this and visit about it a little bit. I'm excited for what we get to do here in Alabama, and I think we try and make wise use of these funds. And it's been a great partnership between us and the Fish and Wildlife Service and our local governments. And we've a lot of these boat ramps that we're building. We're entering into agreements with the counties or the cities to maintain those. And if we're going to put all this money in up front at no cost to you, can you help us take care of it in the future? And the resounding yes on that. We've got great partners around the state. They see what this means to their communities, and I look forward to continue to do more good work with these funds and telling our story a little bit about what we are doing.
Great. Tom?
Yeah, I'll just pick up on where Chris said about telling the good story. So folks should check out a website, partner with a payer, all one word, partnerwithapayer.org. And it tells the story of conservation and public opportunities to get on the water, get in the woods, take a hunter ed class, go boating, of state fish and wildlife agencies. Partnerwithapayer.org. It acknowledges the good work of a partnership. That partnership is industry. It's the National Shooting Sports Foundation, Archery Trade Association, American Sportfish Association, Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, and it tells these stories in 2 to 3 minute videos on all facets of hunting, angling, boating, conservation, education of sportsmen and women. And it's a really good resource if you really want to see how this money hits the ground in communities, makes a difference to species of wildlife, but also generations of people across the country, Alaska to Florida to Louisiana to Maine. And it's a really good story. It's a uniquely American story because of the way the system is funded. And I'll end with that, but it's sort of good work all around. And as Chris said, particularly with the anniversary, it's even more to celebrate and acknowledge.
And one more time, that was partnerwithapayer.org.
Correct.
All right, very good. We'll make sure to include that link in the show notes as well. Thank you for that. No, that's great. Um, Chris Horton, any parting words?
No, I really want to thank our guests for taking the time to join us today, talking about this program, and I think all the information's been really useful. I know I can't believe we've already burned through an hour. I think we could probably go through and talk about more and some more examples of how this program has benefited anglers and natural resources in general for the public in general. But we got to stop somewhere. But thank y'all so much for your time.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for your time. And I 100% what Chris just said. It could do this another hour or two easily. And maybe we do this down the line when legislation gets passed, things are reauthorized, and we have some more celebrating to do. And we can have those conversations. I will leave it with this. I think we still have more work ahead of us. And I've said this on the program a number of times as far as educating, advocating, telling our story into tally, not just us, the wonks that are living this stuff every day that we're in this, but at the hunter education level, at the R3 level, like the first messaging we need to come out with is telling the story of Pittman Robinson, Dingle Johnson, how this whole thing works. Um, and the same at our legislators. I don't think it's a heavy lift. I think if we all kind of get on the same page, we can do it. I know some states have taken to putting some of this stuff on the front page or their hunting or fishing digest, but whatever that looks like, we can always do better. I think we need to the all the examples that were given here that generationally we're falling off, and if we don't tell our history, someone else is going to tell it for us. But that not to be doom and gloom. I think these are great stories to tell, and we should be excited to tell them to the next generation. So we will leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to catching up with you down the line.
That was good. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. All right, very good. My thanks to Tom, Commissioner Blankenship, Chris Horton, as always, for that entertaining look at what is the Sport Fish Restoration Act, the deep dives there, and the great examples provided. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, the contributions there, and hopefully you learned something that you didn't know going into that show. Still time to celebrate that as we head into the back half of the year. Plenty of fishing to be had, and keep that in the forefront of your mind when you're going out there and you're buying those fishing licenses and all that gear and filling up your boat with gas and directly contributing to the very system that keeps the resources healthy and allows us to get out. So we'll call that a show. Appreciate you tuning in as always. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, fill those 5 stars in where you can. Apple, Spotify, that's the two hangouts really. There are some other platforms folks are listening on, but the majority of you are coming from Apple and Spotify. So both of those have the ability for you to subscribe and follow and have a rating system. It would be very appreciated if you guys could take the 2 seconds, go ahead, click on both of those items, and help us continue to be discovered out there in the podcast universe by new people and welcoming them into our audience. As always, CSF is your inside connection to outdoor legislation. We will see you next week for the roundup. So long. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your support is crucial, and you can help us out right now by leaving a review, filling in those 5 stars where available, sharing this episode with friends and family, and engaging with us socially. CSF can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Together, we can protect the outdoor sports we love and continue to keep you informed wherever you are. That's it for this week. Until next time, we'll see you later.